Samir, I can see you've raised your hand. If you have any questions or anything, do put them in the chat box, and I'll get back to you on there. So well done for raising your hand, and I'll get back to you on any comments there. Okay then. As it is 3:30 now, I know that a few of the students might still be dialing in the next few minutes or so, but because the students that are already on the line have joined us for the 3:30 start, I don't want to keep them waiting. So really, first and foremost, it's kind of hello from me. It's Ellie at Pathway CTM. I know that there are quite a few familiar names there, so well done for joining us again. We're continually impressed by the students who you're taking your time out, being at home, particularly at the moment when things are really kind of uncertain, using this time to your advantage to learn a little bit more about companies you've never heard of, about industries you've never heard, that you don't know much about. Using this time to like gain some more employability skills is such a good way to make the most of the situation. So well done for joining us. That's first and foremost, but not only that, it's also one of the hottest days of the year. So the fact that you're in front of your computer screen at 3:30, trying to learn a little bit more about a particular journey into the home building and construction industry is really, really impressive. And that's really what we're all about at Pathway CTM. So we're here, as you know, to help you learn a little bit more and kind of equip you a bit better for your futures. And I know everyone on the line is really keen to get into that kind of world of home building and construction. So and we've had a number of different kind of journeys spoken about over the past few weeks and months now, and so today is another kind of addition to that. So I know I'm trying to keep my eye out for a couple of the students who I know are really interested in kind of the sector and journey we're going to talk about today. So I want to give you a bit of an agenda in terms of what we're going to run through. So you've had this introduction from me, and I'm going to continue that just after this to explain a little bit more about kind of the logistics of the session, how you can get the most out of it. I've just seen Abour join, and I know that I shouldn't call you out, but I'm just so happy you joined because I think this will be really relevant for you. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be finishing off his introduction, talking about how you can get involved, how you can ask some questions. And then we're going to be hearing from someone else, a special guest today, who's going to be talking about kind of their journey in the same way that we've heard from other people from different companies over the past few weeks, but really a different kind of role in that world and industry, and how he got there today. So later on, I'm going to let him introduce himself, but that's just a kind of introduction in terms of what we're going to be talking about. It's going to be around 40 to 45 minutes, but depending on kind of the questions and number of questions that you have. So that's an overall really kind of agenda. We'll come to any questions in the Q&A section at the end, but really you can ask any questions throughout. So as you can see, moving through here, I just want to talk to you a little bit about how you can ask those questions. So if you're on your computer, which I think 99% of the students, which I can see are, there are a number of different ways you can ask questions, or you can kind of communicate with us throughout the session. So hi Abour, you can talk in the chat box. So Samir's just asked a question there, which I can get onto later in the session. So you can use the chat box, which I'll be keeping an eye on, but you can also write any questions in the Q&A box. So well done for writing in the chat box, but I would really encourage you, if you do have questions, to pop them in the Q&A box, because then I can keep an eye on them, and I can make sure that they're all answered before the end of the session. So that's really, hi Jake, that's really good to see you all kind of interacting already. So do go ahead, ask any questions in the Q&A box. There's no such thing as a silly question. Even if we don't know the answers today, the fact that you ask the questions is really important, so we can make sure that we follow up and get back to you and help support you with any questions you might have about kind of any questions about going into the industry, which we might not have the answers for today, but go ahead and ask them. Also, don't hold back. Do, while we're talking, if you think of any questions, then go ahead and put them in, because you're not interrupting us. We won't stop the flow of what we're talking about, and go ahead and ask them, because we'll get to them at some point in the session. So really encourage that. Whoever asks the first question, I'll definitely shout out next week. So we're always so impressed by the person who asks the first question, because I think that's really important in terms of showing that you are keen, you are engaged, and obviously you are by the fact you're on the session today. But it's really impressive to get out there and start answering those questions that you might have. So really, what I want to give you is a bit of an overview in terms of what do you want to get from today. So as I mentioned, it's a short session, you know, talking about a particular journey and another kind of insight into this world and industry. So really, we're going to get an introduction from Martin, who's going to introduce himself in a second. But then we're going to get a bit of an overview in terms of what the company is that Martin works for. And then we're going to open up to any kind of questions that you might have. So really, we want you to leave today knowing some answers to your questions, but also maybe opening up some more questions around maybe whether a similar route to what we're going to talk about today might be relevant for you. So really, I'm not kind of the expert today, and today isn't really about me. So what I'm going to do now is kind of hand over to Martin, and if it's okay, just to give us a really brief kind of introduction in terms of who you are, what you do, and the company you work for, if that's all right.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all very much for showing your interest and joining us today on this, what is a very, very warm day. And I'll apologise straight away, linked to that. I'm in quite a light room, so you probably can't see me very well because of there's too much sun coming in through the back of the house. I'm Martin Abour. I work for Gleeds, and I'm a professional quantity surveyor. What that means is I work for the client rather than the builder, which some of you may be familiar with the other role as a quantity surveyor. Like many of you, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left school. I went to university because it felt like a good thing to do. It was, you know, the social aspects of that and into my sport. When I left university, I still didn't have a particular profession that I wanted to get into, but my father was an architect, and what he suggested is that I had a conversation with a few of his friends and colleagues, and I wasn't really an artistic person, so I didn't think that I would be particularly good at being an architect. But because I was quite good at figures and numbers, I did economics at university. I spoke to a colleague of his who was a quantity surveyor, got interested, and applied for a job. Was lucky enough to get that. So I joined a large firm of quantity surveyors in London quite a while ago, I have to admit, 25, 30 years ago, and worked on a range of projects, including some quite big projects. I worked on the British Library, which is quite close to King's Cross on Euston Road, which was one of the major building projects in London at that time. It was going on for 10 years. As I had a degree in economics, it wasn't directly relevant to my role as a quantity surveyor. I had to go and do night classes to get a first qualification in quantity surveying. These days, I think what people would do is they would do a day release degree, that changed a little bit over the years. And then when I completed my written course, I had to do the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors exams, which enabled me to become qualified as a chartered quantity surveyor. After 5 years working in London, I chose to relocate to Cambridge, where I currently live and work, and I now work for Gleeds. We are a large international construction consultancy. We have 20 offices in the UK and over 50 offices around the world in all sorts of quite exciting locations like Australia, China, India, and we've got a thriving business in the United States at the moment. So there are opportunities in an organisation like ours to transfer around, so that's quite exciting. I now specialise in work on historic buildings. It was just something that I was interested in, had the opportunity to work on some listed buildings, and chose to sort of take that a little bit further. And I did actually do a further course, an MSc in conservation of buildings. And I'm now lucky enough to work for some amazing projects. We're doing a lot of work with the National Trust all around the country. Doing work for the College colleges at Cambridge University, and we're currently completing a project at Nottingham Castle. So I now head up a small office of 20 people in Cambridge, and we offer quantity surveying services, project management services at Cambridge, but Gleeds as an organisation, if you go and have a look on the website, you'll see that we do offer a number of other professional services within the construction industry. So I won't bore you any longer, but if anyone's got any questions, I'd be very pleased to answer them.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a great kind of summary. Thank you so much, Martin. I have a few questions maybe first, if that's okay. I know students, you've written in a few questions into the chat box, but do continue to kind of ask questions in the Q&A while I kind of start with my questions. So I know that you spoke about, you went down the university route and ultimately did kind of something non-construction focused in your university degree. I wonder, and it sounds like the influence of kind of your family and that experience got you into the world of construction. Did, I guess, in the role you're doing, do you have to have a university degree? I know that you said that you have to do the quantity surveying kind of chartered academic element to it, but to get to that stage, do you have to have a university degree? Do you know that?
No, you don't. I mean, I think that the typical route these days is for people post-18 to apply to a course at one of the universities. So you can either do a full-time course in quantity surveying, or you can, if you can get an employment with an organisation, you can do a day release degree, which typically would be 1 day a week, or an apprenticeship, which is either 1 day a week or sometimes in the first year, for 2 days in the first year. So that is actually quite a good way because you're learning on the job. So you are being paid, not brilliantly, but you're being paid, so you have some income, you get an experience of the profession and the work by being in an office and site-based environment, and you also have the opportunity of do university and learning as well. So that's the most common route these days.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I guess if you are on day release, there's kind of, Samir, thank you for your question, and I think kind of ties into what I'm about to ask is, so do you think that that is an apprenticeship? If you're on day release and you're studying at a university, do you think they offer apprenticeships in the quantity surveying space at Gleeds, or is it in other roles?
No, we do offer apprenticeships. And, you know, in our Cambridge office, we've got one apprentice at the moment. So we've only got onto this relatively recently, and I think the apprentice in Gabriella probably knows more about this than me in terms of the length of time that the apprenticeship, 2 or 3 years, I'm guessing. We've only got into it relatively recently, and I do have to say that, you know, we're all in a very difficult economic climate at the moment. So I think it is going to be challenging for businesses like ours to retain staff, keep people motivated, and I fear that there may be a difficulty around availability of jobs coming up. But yeah, in theory, yes, we do take apprentices, and the key thing there is that people need to be able to achieve the university entrance requirements, which would be around A-level or equivalent courses, and the qualifying marks and UCAS points.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. And I guess so you went down the university route. There's also the kind of route, as you say, going straight in, kind of apprenticeship route. If you were, 16 to 18-year-old, looking back on your 16 to 18-year-old self, and you don't quite know yet, you think at the end of the road you'd be interested in quantity surveying or where you are now, is there any kind of advice or tips that you would give to yourself at that age, kind of starting out on the venture that you've now been through?
Well, I think applying to jobs is always difficult. I think what you have to be is brave, just write to people, try and make most of what you've got. Everybody's got the skills. It's a matter of just sort of presenting yourself in the most positive light. And don't be put off when you don't get an opportunity, because I think it's just a matter of a little bit of luck, a little bit of random timing, but take a lot of care with your CVs. People really, really do look at the as much as anything, grammar, spelling, and the content. You'd be surprised, and I think people are allowed one spelling mistake, and then the second spelling mistake probably end up in the thing, because there's so many people.
Yeah, no, definitely great advice. And I think I can see Gabriella enthusiastically agreeing with you there, because I know that, Gabriella, you've been helping out some of the students with their CVs recently. So that's a really good kind of first bit and key bit of advice. I guess on top of the, attention to detail and the CV themselves, is there anything else? Like, I'm sure, considering you're at that level now, you've got a team of 20 people, you must have had a fair few interviews that you've been on the other side of. Do you have any advice in terms of interviews and what you kind of look for in that side of things? What impresses you?
I think it's always very good if you can drop in an interview, that you've had a look at the website, that you know certain things about the business. In a sort of role like us, when candidates come in and they say, "Oh, I understand you've worked on job X or job Y," it just shows that they have taken the time and effort and actually done a little bit of research. I mean, I normally, if I'm interviewing people, I ask people, "Have you had a look at the website?" And then, in the old days, there would be a few people who actually said no. And now I think nobody actually says no. They haven't really delved very deep. So I think preparation and passion, showing a passion that you really want to do these jobs. I think that particularly for what I do, people think it's all numbers based. It isn't actually. It's as much to do with communication, to do with figures. So you do need to be an all-rounder. You need to be able to present. You need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to be confident on the telephone and in the meeting.
No, definitely, that's a great bit of advice in terms of communication as well. And saying that, then even the fact that Jake, Ibad, Samir, you've all written in the chat box. I know it's a very strange time at the moment. We're not all in the same room, therefore we can't communicate in the way that we're kind of used to. But the fact that you've kind of said hello, you've started engaging with the group. Michael, you've just asked a question. I'm impressed already at communication skills virtually. So well done to the students who are doing that. And I think it really ties into what Martin's saying in terms of what he would look out for if you got to the stage you were in an interview. So I'm gonna just go quickly to some of the questions that have come in on the Q&A box, Martin, and some of them are quite specific, so if we can't answer them, that's absolutely fine, but some brilliant questions, so well done to the students. So from Michael, and if we can always follow up with this one if not, but do you know, are there any trade apprenticeships on offer? I know you're a consultancy, so maybe not, but
well, I mean, we obviously don't offer trades, but the building companies will do, and I think most of the major companies and quite a few small ones do offer trade apprenticeships. I think it's a matter of trying to inquire, trying to find out, and writing to people. I think that the writing is a sort of a skill that's actually being lost. But sometimes I think writing a letter actually catches the attention even more than an email.
Yeah, definitely. And also, Michael, on that, we can help support you if you want to, if you're looking for a trade role and you're yet to speak to Gabriella, albeit Gleeds can't offer those trade apprenticeships, but we know some companies which do, so do get in touch with us and we can help you on that one. So they're flooding in now. So Tyrone, great question, which I actually had on my list to ask. So what you mentioned earlier about you not necessarily being creative but still interested in the industry. So what creative things could you do to help build yourself as an engineer other than academics? Okay, so if you're not hugely academic, is there, and if you're saying that earlier creative wasn't your focus, but maybe a student has a creative focus and they want to get into the industry and they're not hugely academic, is there any kind of space where you think actually creative, you mentioned communication, is there any kind of roles you'd recommend to someone who's thinking more creative, they want to be in the construction industry but they're more of a creative than a
well, it's a difficult one. I mean, I think again it comes down to most jobs now require post-school education of some description. I think that people trying to create vocational courses which are not unduly academic, but still with a structure and leading on. So I would have thought that it does come back a little bit to, I think that a lot of people may say they're not academic, that perhaps they haven't enjoyed school. I think that is a slightly different thing. It means you're still very capable. But I think that the difference is finding something you're interested in rather than being sort of forced down a line of something perhaps you're not quite so interested in. So if you can meet the entry requirements and get onto the course, there are numerous ways these days of different pathways of getting to a level of qualification. I think it is likely you will need some form of qualification to work in the industry. I would have thought working for a building contractor, specialising being a site engineer, but that would involve some formal courses along the way as well as learning on the job.
Yeah, no, great. And also, Tyrone, if you are not sure exactly, you can always follow up with us and we can work through kind of where you're at academically at the moment and what next steps could be available to you based on that. So we'll definitely help support you there. So here's a question from an anonymous attendee, which is obviously of course fine. So anyone who wants to ask questions anonymously, can you please talk me through a typical day of being a quantity surveyor?
Okay, well, I mean, I think it's, there isn't really a typical day, but I'll start anyway. And just to explain the role for the people who are not entirely sure, quantity surveyors, our role is the responsibility for the cost aspects of building projects. So there are some quantity surveyors who work for builders, and they would be predominantly putting together tenders for work, measuring work on site and trying to value changes as the process works forward. For me, my role as a private quantity surveyor working for clients is I work very closely with the architect and other design consultants. So initially a client comes to us and says, I'm thinking of building a particular type of building. Let's say it's a school, and they say, right, well, I'd like to build a school, I'd like it to be this size, I'd like it to cover these facilities. How much do you think I'm going to need to spend to build that school? So what I would do is prepare estimates and initially say, well, we think that school is going to cost £1 million. And the client then has a difficult decision. I mean, if they have that amount of money, great. If they don't have that amount of money, we have to start talking about doing something slightly different. So that's the role, and because I'm quite senior in my role, a lot of what I do is discussing with clients the strategy around how we can get building projects started and managing costs as costs change as building projects develop. And you all will have heard, on the news that the horror stories of the building projects which go way over budget. I'm afraid that is a sort of recurring theme. It's difficult to keep a building project on track. That's what my sort of role is to try and do.
Great. Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? I suppose there's no typical day, but it's really useful to get an overview of what a quantity surveyor does, because in all honesty, I wasn't 100% sure. So some of the students will definitely benefit from hearing that in a bit more detail. This is probably quite a subjective one, but I'll ask anyway, and don't worry if you don't know or feel comfortable answering, but do you know what the best universities to study quantity surveying are? Or do you have any ideas of people in your team or people that have gone through and studied and really successfully enjoyed it at a particular university?
I do know that Portsmouth has a good reputation, also Nottingham-Trent. We have people in our London office who go to South Bank University. I think there's not a huge number of universities which offer these courses. You do need to have a look. I think probably, I'm guessing 20 universities which offer the courses. And we also send people to Anglia-Ruskin University in Chelmsford. I'm sure there's plenty of other universities that I don't know about, but that's a bit of a selection. I think, am I right in thinking most people are in and around London?
Yeah, we've got a variety on the calls. So in and around home counties, probably. So that kind of narrows it down in terms of the fact that not all universities across the country do it. So if anyone does kind of want support looking at those other kind of universities that might offer it, then we can definitely do that. But that's really helpful. So thank you, because it sounds like South Bank is the one.
Reading is another one.
Oh, Reading. I know we have some students who are from Reading who are on the programme, so yeah, definitely that one as well. But good question, and thank you. So on to IBAD. So how is the recruitment stage like at Gleeds? So if you were to want to apply to be a quantity surveyor at Gleeds, do you know kind of what hoops you'd have to jump through in terms of application?
I think that you'd have to have a look on the website to see what vacancies are available. I mean, I'm a big fan of just writing anyway. Even if there aren't any vacancies, I think it's still worth. Don't be afraid if you don't get a response. I know that sounds impolite, but I think it is more important to write quite a few letters. Hopefully you will get a response, but not everybody always replies. There are, obviously, with sort of academic courses, there is a time, there's a right time to apply. I sense that this is possibly a little bit late in the year if you're thinking around trying to get onto the course in September, but this is not a normal year, so I think that it's probably worth having a look and applying, because there might be some last minute decisions that people make. Because at the moment a lot of people are reevaluating what they're trying to do, and not trying to make too long-term decisions at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. So IBAD, get writing those emails and you can share them with Gabriella and see what she thinks before you send them over in terms of starting that process of application. Even to Gleeds, I know Gleeds have office in London, don't they? So IBAD, maybe that's relevant to you. You could send an email to someone and we can point you in the right direction for that. So great question. So Samir asks, what's the balance of working in the office and on site if you're a quantity surveyor?
Okay, well, if you're a professional quantity surveyor like me, you do spend more time in the office than on site. That would be different if you were working for a builder. And as a sort of junior quantity surveyor, you probably spend even more time in the office. So really, there's three major components. It's office-based, site-based, and then meetings, which would be in either clients or other design team members' offices. I mean, we're all now living in this virtual world, so we have design meetings via Zoom, and there's no face-to-face meetings at the moment. But don't think you're going to be out all the time if you are starting out, because you do need to get there's a lot of measurement and drawings. You do need to be sort of technologically savvy. You need to understand what's going on, because these days all of the designer's drawings are done by computer-aided design, and there's a lot of reading drawings, measuring drawings, and then we have all sorts of programs which produce estimates and programs for work.
Great, and really good question, Samir. So it kind of varies, but you predominantly will be kind of office-based, but still get a chance to get out on site. Some really brilliant questions today. So you're a great example of this, Martin, but what's the career progression like in quantity surveying?
I mean, career progression is interesting, I think, for everybody. There isn't a sort of set route in these things. I think all you have to do is you start in a job, you have to just see where it might take you. Typically, doing the route that I did, there are steps along the way in that you start off as a trainee or a graduate, you're aiming towards getting qualified, so that is a step up in sort of salary, responsibility, title. And also, if you think about it, if you are working 4 days a week and then you finish your course and you start working 5 days a week, yes, you get additional money for that. So there are logical steps along the way, but in terms of moving, up it's more than just the sort of technical skills, relationships with people, and so it's difficult. You can't say everybody. I'm lucky that I've managed to get to a relatively senior position. Some people do. Some people don't necessarily want that. Some people prefer to be doing the same task that they're comfortable with, and some people like the challenge of something new.
No, definitely, but also I'm impressed that you're asking that question as not having even entered the industry yet, thinking about your career progression. That's impressive as a 17, 18-year-old. So great question. We do have some more in the Q&A box, but in light of time, Gabriella, I want to just hand over to you. I know you've been talking to the students throughout the week, and we do use a little window of time just to ask any questions or that might have come up, and I know you've popped a couple in the chat box, which you might want to just ask a couple based on your week and some of the conversations you've been having.
Yeah, hi Martin. Some of the conversations that I've had with the students sort of are very hands-on in terms of what they want to be doing, but there's also that aspect, like you described, that you can actually become, go up the career path and become a leader of a team or a manager, etc. And those skills as becoming a leader, you can't sort of just go and sort of have a course on leadership in that sense. So what skills do you think you need to acquire along your journey to become that really good leader?
I think I'd be confident in what the job involves, and you've got to be a sort of listener as well as wanting to take responsibility. I think that taking on responsibility, most employers are happy with the person who says, I'll take on some more work. The person who hides in the corner, who waits to be told to do something, probably doesn't have as much chance of progressing as the person who goes and says, I think by tomorrow I will have finished this task. Have you got something else? Or I particularly like doing X and Y. Have you got anything more similar with that? Or how about I phone up so-and-so and see what's going on? I think it's all about taking the initiative, really, understanding what you're doing, and you've got to get on with people and see that there's always more than one way of looking at things. Not everybody's exactly the same. Sometimes to communicate, you need to communicate sort of twice in a slightly different way. If someone doesn't understand what you said the first time, it's not their fault, it's possibly your fault, but try and explain it in a different way.
Thank you. That was very comprehensive. No, that's good. And the other question I wanted to ask is, I looked on your website earlier and was looking at the core values that you had 3, and one of them that sort of struck me in particular, especially with COVID right now, when people sort of stuck at home. One of them was, we are creative and realistic. And I was just wondering how you translate that into the sort of lockdown scenario right now as a company, and maybe you as with your team.
Well, I think we all have to accept that we are in completely unusual circumstances. So I've worked through several economic cycles. I've worked through recessions, which are one thing, but this is completely different in terms of being completely isolated. I think that we are now, it's so good this has happened now and not 20 years ago. 20 years ago, people would not have been able to keep in touch at all. We all, within a week, we all became not experts, but users of Microsoft Teams, Zoom, all these platforms. And we realized that actually they're very, very valuable, particularly for large organizations in different locations. I mean, yesterday I was on a call with our chief executive, with one of 250 people on a Microsoft Teams meeting. And, you know, there were people from all over this country, you know, from Scotland, Wales, and I believe there were a couple of people who dialed in from overseas offices if the time zone was, you know, suitable. And that was very, very powerful that to actually, for the chief executive to sit there, to see him sitting in his sitting room, you know, it's sort of a human being with the same issues of, you know, dog wandering across the room. And in terms of trying to, you know, understand, you've got to try and link in with people. We have regular team meetings, small number of meetings. We have 3 and 4 person calls on a regular basis. Some people are finding it difficult to work from home. If you've got a young family or a house which is perhaps unsuitable, in a small house with not enough room for separation, just trying to support people. I mean, it's Mental Awareness Week this week, so people are trying to be very understanding, and there's all sorts of group activities that we're doing. We have an open mic music event tomorrow night. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. We have yoga sessions, gym sessions. I'm currently trying to write a quiz at the moment for my team for a quiz night tomorrow, and I'm slightly struggling with the My Quiz website. So I think I'm going to resort to pen and paper.
Well, good luck with that, and thank you very much.
No, that's a really nice and important part, I think, of students when you're thinking about applying and you're thinking about maybe which companies to apply for, that making sure that you check out and you kind of understand what those core values are of the companies that you're looking at, because it's really important if you're going to then, as Martin says, go on and work in teams and be connected, even in these times, the people you're working with very closely. You want to make sure that you're aligned and you understand what they're trying to achieve to make sure you fit in with that. So that's a really good example of that. We've got quite a few other questions come in from the student. I'm just going to whiz through another few of them, and some of them I'm just going to say that we'll get back to on a little bit separately, because there are a few questions around kind of engineering, so around GCSEs and engineering, which is quite specific. Michael will come back to you on that one separately. Shreya asks, are there any opportunities to travel? Obviously not right now, but in general, in terms of the site, I don't know whether internationally or around the country, do you feel like you're put on different sites?
Yes, I mean, we do travel quite a lot in normal circumstances. I mean, I personally travel around the country quite a lot. I'm in a region which involves Bristol and Cardiff, Southampton, so it's quite a lot of internal travel. I've got projects in Nottingham. There's a theatre project that we won last year in Edinburgh, part of the Edinburgh Festival. And overseas, I personally haven't travelled a huge amount through work. When I did go to Berlin for a theatre building, but there is, within our organisation, there are opportunities, and there's actually a programme where people can apply for an exchange for a week or might be 2-week period to one of the other offices, and so that's sort of by application, and perhaps 6 or 8 people get the opportunity to go off to India or Australia and work in this for a 2-week period. And it builds the team working very well, because what it then means is, you know, the people, it's much easier to get on the phone and talk to them when you've actually met them. So there are opportunities, and people relocate. Somebody I was working with relocated from London to America. So there are opportunities, yes.
Great. Well, Shreya, that definitely answers your question, but great question to ask, and I think shines light on those company values as well, and what great opportunities that there are available. Based on the other questions, and a few people have written in and said, you know, that they're struggling, or they've applied for a few but didn't get any response. Rather than that being a statement, I guess one question I'd ask is, over your career, I guess it is a journey. You don't always get yeses. Would you give any advice? What advice would you give in terms of resilience and how to keep positive in times maybe where you're hearing no's or you're not hearing back?
It is difficult. Everybody finds it difficult when they get a sort of knockback. I think try and find out why. And I think that what you have to realise that in certain instances there are a huge number of responses. And it's quite difficult from the other side of the fence to give a full sort of breakdown of why you didn't get the opportunity. But I think, back to what I said before, prepare your CV as best as you can. I think you've got to understand, you've got to realise what you're applying for. You've got to be appropriate. You've got to really want to do it yourself as well, because I think people can see through. If you are just going through the motions, people don't necessarily, people can see that. You know, I've interviewed somebody and I really asked them at the end, I said, do you really want to do this? It sort of came out and she said, well, actually, you know what, my father asked me to apply for this job. And I said, well, okay, that's fine, but you've got to really want to do it. And don't be put off. But I think qualifications, sadly, in life are really important. So if you have to understand if your qualifications aren't at the level that they need to be, that unfortunately there will be somebody else whose qualifications are. So I think try and check beforehand what the entry requirements are. And for apprenticeships, I think, well, you need to understand what the requirement is, because there is an academic requirement related to the apprenticeship. So for us, you've got to be able to get onto a degree course. So therefore, your GCSEs, your A-levels, and BTEC equivalents have got to be at a certain level. If you can't get onto the university course, you can't be accepted on the apprenticeship. So I think but not all apprenticeships are university.
Yeah, no, that's great. Some really good advice. And so I've seen a couple of students in there, and definitely take those points in terms of research of your grade qualifications and asking for some feedback. That's brilliant. Okay, I'm just going to get one last question in. I'm conscious of time, but this is a really good last question. Is there anything I could do now to get a head start compared to others applying for quantity surveying jobs?
I think you can read up what the job entails. I think if you can actually, it isn't the most straightforward jobs, and therefore, I spent my whole life either trying to explain to people what my job is, or most of the time not really bothering because it's too complicated. But if you can read up and understand what it is, and in an interview explain that the aspects of that job that interest you, that would be a very good way of doing it.
Definitely, and also beyond that, whoever that was from an anonymous attendee, so do shout out if you want me to name call you, because it's a brilliant question. But also, you're on this webinar, that's giving you a head start compared to other people applying to jobs. You're trying to find out more, you're learning more about companies which offer quantity surveying roles. So as a second answer as well to that question, you're doing exactly the right thing to get yourself a head start. So if you get to the point you're in an interview and you tell them that you spent an hour on a Thursday of lockdown understanding a bit more about quantity surveying, and someone who been to themselves, then in my head, if I was sitting on the other side of the interview, then I'd be impressed by that, and that's a good head start. So well done. Right then, well,
before you wind up, I think there is the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors website would be a very good starting point, because there are different types of surveying that you can get into, and there are sort of summaries there. So that would be a good starting point.
Definitely, and we can put that in our follow-up. So I just want to get onto the final kind of summary of the end of the session. So firstly and foremost, Martin, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and kind of your expertise to help these students. And I know that they do too, so thank you so much for that. Thanks to all the students who tirelessly come onto our webinars every week and learn a little bit more. And not only that, but I think this is probably one of the most questions asked in one of these construction webinars. So Martin, you've obviously engaged our students, which is great. If in terms of next steps, every single person who's been on the webinar will get a follow-up in terms of a little bit of feedback, and if you want to basically get some more support from us in this direction. As you can see on the screen, if you have any questions in the meantime on anything to do with which we've discussed in today's session, then do email us on student@pathwaysctm.com with your name and the fact you're on today's session with any questions. Secondly, every single student who's on this webinar, I really want you to follow Pathway CTM on Instagram. That is purely because there are so many opportunities in terms of what we're offering at the moment. There's a prize, there's a competition going live in the next few days. So I really recommend you following us on Pathway CTM. So one key element of this is in our construction world is we're doing a competition with if all of the students who have been on all of our sessions for the month, then there is a prize at the end of it for us to kind of acknowledge the fact that you really are committed to what we're trying to do in terms of supporting you. So follow us on Pathway CTM, and at the end of the month we will be kind of announcing the winners of those students who've been on all of our sessions, and therefore have a kind of prize draw at the end of it. So follow us on that. Thanks again, Martin, and thanks for the students. And I hope you've enjoyed the session, and I know that I have.
Thank you.